Hello everyone, my name is Mackenzie, and this is Tia. We're looking to see how we can make the city of Houston sustainable in the year 2050. So, similar to everyone else, we're first going to give an introduction to what Houston currently is like. We're going to talk about what their vision is for the future, and what targets and strategies they're going to use to achieve this. And then we're going to look at what Houston looks like in 2050 and talk about some next steps and conclusions. So, a lot of you have probably heard of Houston. They are one of the largest cities in the U.S. with a population of 2.3 million. And they're known as the energy capital of the world because of their large oil and gas industry, particularly the financing as well as refining and other stuff. They are near sea level. That's why they were particularly hard hit by Hurricane Harvey recently. They're only at 15 meters above sea level and right on the coast of Mexico. And they've already had significant green commitments. The mayor is the co-chair of the climate mayor's committee, and so that's a very good step in the right direction.
So looking at Houston's current urban metabolism, which is based on 2050 numbers, which is most available for us, there's kind of a lot going on in this diagram, but just to compare some of the things or discuss some of the points, comparing it to Toronto, their electricity per capita is about 2.5 times what is currently used in Toronto, and their gasoline consumption per capita is almost twice what is being used in Toronto. Another thing to note that we really wanted to target is their very low rates of composting, recycling, and reuse with regards to their waste. So their composting rates is only 10%, recycling is at 12%, and reuse at 0.5%. So Plan Houston is one of kind of those bigger plans that is currently existing, and so we made some modifications to kind of create a vision statement for where we want Houston to be by 2050. So Houston offers opportunity for all and celebrates its diversity of people, economy, culture, and places. Houston promotes healthy, resilient, and sustainable communities through smart civic investments, dynamic partnerships, education, innovation, and planning for tomorrow. Houston is a place where anyone can prosper and feel at home. Houston will become a sustainable city by providing diverse and green options that improve everyone's quality of life. Houston, opportunity, diversity, sustainability, community, home. And so I think a lot of these points in the vision statement, both that were existing in the original statement and the amendments that we made, really speak to SDG 11 and the goals of making the community resilient and safe for everyone. So now that we kind of have a big vision statement, what are the goals, what are the concrete ways in which we plan to change Houston by 2050? So we really wanted to target building energy use by reducing it by 50% per capita, reducing treated water use by 50%, achieve zero construction waste, and really encourage locally sourced materials, and increase waste diversion to at least 75%. We also had a very, I guess, rigorous idea of cutting private vehicle use in half from what it currently is, and we're really going to do that by increasing public transit and active transportation modal share. We really wanted to green the electricity production by having 80% renewables, and we really also wanted to redevelop the 100-year floodplain to increase green space and better mitigate stormwater. And as everyone knows, based on the way that we've structured things to design projects, these are kind of target sectors that we were looking at to implement our goals.
So I'll start with the buildings because they account for almost a third of Houston's greenhouse gas emissions. And so we came up with a bunch of strategies similar to a lot of other teams. I'm just going to highlight the top couple that address each of the key sectors. So if you look at building energy use, about 40% of it comes from heating and cooling. So we looked at things like geothermal heat pumps or just conventional heat pumps, so there's a way to both electrify and reduce the energy use from that. Then we also looked at LED retrofits to address lighting and appliances use, as well as solar water heating to address the water heating concerns. So that's how you address the energy use as a whole, but then you also look at things like green roofs to address stormwater use, which is another key aspect of our design, but that's both to address the stormwater and energy efficiency.
With respect to the transportation, as I mentioned before, our major challenge was how to shift private vehicle modal share to public transit and to active transportation. And so two ways in which we did that was to make private vehicles less attractive and to make public transit and active transportation more attractive. So we use primarily financial mechanisms such as congestion pricing, carbon taxes, and those types of means to decrease the amount of modal share of private vehicles, and also traffic calming measures such as reducing speed limits for cars. We also wanted to make Houston more walkable by making the sidewalks bigger, which Mackenzie will talk about more later, and also expanding the bike lanes by an additional 700 kilometers. And so down at the bottom you can see the modal shares, how they shift from 2017 to 2050. You know, almost all of the modal share that gets shifted away from private vehicles goes to public transit, but there's also huge, quite a lot of increasing from both biking and walking. With respect to public transit, Houston has, in this map here, they have 3 out of 5 of these LRT lines. The ones that aren't implemented but they kind of have a plan for it but isn't being implemented yet are the blue and gold lines. And so we really think that they would benefit a lot from actually implementing these lines and really promoting transit-oriented development along these lines. We also wanted to double the transit frequency outside of the LRT and increase bus service to an additional 10% of the population and implement dedicated rights-of-ways.
And so everyone's probably heard about Hurricane Harvey, which was in Houston, and one of the big takeaways from it was not only is Houston susceptible to hurricanes, and that especially with climate change, it's a real risk moving forward, but there's an issue with land use planning where a lot of the damage caused by the hurricane was caused by poor planning, where there's a significant number of residents within the 100-year floodplain, which by nature floods relatively regularly, and with climate change should likely increase in its flooding. And so as part of our land use, one of the big things is we're going to convert the 100-year floodplain to green space to avoid those risks moving forward and improve the safety of the residents, which is one of the sustainable development parts under SDG 11. And we'll also work on transit-oriented development, as Thea was discussing earlier. So, for example, Houston's population is increasing by 1 million people, and some people are moving because of that 100-year floodplain. Between the two, more than a fifth of that can be accommodated just by transit-oriented development along the LRT, let alone all the other transits throughout the city by matching the recommended values by the Federal Transit Agency. Okay, and then, so for neighborhood design, currently it's very auto-centric, and so a big part of the neighborhood design will be focusing on how we can improve active transportation and transit. So that means dedicated right-of-ways, shortening crosswalks, improving the greenery to make it better to walk, and so things like making green spaces within a 5-minute walk will help do that. And also adjust the zoning laws so that you can have better density in your city. And so one of the big things if you're looking at greenhouse gas emissions is to look at the energy sector. And so 77% of Houston's current electricity mix comes from fossil fuels, a lot of coal and natural gas. And so moving forward, we are hoping to electrify 80% of that, as Thea was saying. Make it renewable, and then also converting things that already use fossil fuels, like residential homes use a significant portion of natural gas, and transportation uses a gasoline and diesel. So by electrifying both of these with heat pumps and electric vehicles, we can have significant greenhouse gas savings.
So looking at the water for Houston, really, one of our goals was to reduce treated water usage by 50%, and the way that we're going to supplement that reduction is through gray water and rainwater, so 25% gray water and 25% rainwater. Houston has a lot of rain, kind of consistently throughout the year. We made kind of a rough estimate of if you were to use rainwater harvesting on 50% of the developed land area, you would actually meet all of Houston's water demands for 7 out of 12 months of the year, and for the months that you didn't meet it up to 100%, it's like over 80% met. But we didn't want to be so ambitious because there is obviously infrastructure related to rainwater harvesting that maybe not be required, especially considering how Houston is planning on meeting their treated water demands by making more of that infrastructure. Another really great benefit of gray water reuse and having that water go through homes multiple times, as seen in the diagrams, is that it also reduces the amount of wastewater that requires treatment after the fact. In terms of stormwater solutions, as Mackenzie said, we really wanted to reclaim and redevelop that 100-year floodplain to mitigate the stormwater management, or stormwater issues, I guess. And there's a couple of other projects that are being implemented by Houston, such as implementing over 4,000 stormwater inlets and in-pipe detention to really manage that stormwater. With respect to waste management, there were a couple of ideas that we had. One is to reach zero construction waste by 2050, and one of the ways that we plan on meeting this, that Houston is already starting to implement, is by having warehouses that store unused construction materials, and then those warehouses are open to the community so that they can access those materials and kind of close the loop on that waste stream. Another revolutionary program that Houston was on the verge of implementing and then has kind of delayed is the One Bin for All program. And so it's started by a company called EcoHub, which is actually based in Houston, and it's this new technology that sorts out waste using like different machines and identifying different materials instead of having people sort their own waste out. And it actually has at least a 75% up to 95% diversion rate. And so that's much better than like what a lot of waste management programs currently are doing or are able to do, and it also makes it much easier for residents. And then the organic materials are going to be anaerobically digested to produce biogas, which again closes the loop on that and makes useful energy for the city. And so then, when looking at 2050 Houston's urban metabolism, a couple of like really important things to note and how this differs from its current state is the closed loop. So especially with gray water and with the converted biogas from the compost and the reuse of materials, and also by reducing like residential energy uses and by electrification and cleaning the electricity, we reduced a lot of fossil fuel uses. Natural gas use is cut in half compared to 2016, and diesel and gasoline is like about a quarter of what it was in 2016. And we actually achieved a greenhouse gas emissions reduction of 80% per capita, which is pretty good.
And so some key takeaways is, first off, if you're looking to reduce greenhouse gases, the majority of our greenhouse gases were addressed through electrification and cleaning up the grid. That over 57% of our GHG emissions were addressed through this. And this is also a very effective way of reducing greenhouse gases without changing user behavior, which is makes it easier for the existing residents themselves to make infrastructure change as opposed to a change that they're required to make. This also shows that there's no one solution to address any of these issues, that even with the three measures that were incorporated into electrification, you still could only address half the issues. And so you really, if you want to address both water and greenhouse gases and waste and all the other aspects of sustainability, you need a really holistic solution. And then it's important to consider that impact of solutions can typically be felt over many sectors. For example, improving the walkability was shown to increase land value in Austin, Texas, and so things like that are important to consider. So benefits are multifaceted and not just within one sector. And then there's generally a lack of circular flow. That in our 2050 design, we improved that significantly, but that's definitely something that we saw was an issue when we looked at existing conditions. One thing we noticed though was that by just focusing on the city, we sometimes ignore the regional context. That the greater Houston area is much larger, and there's significant emissions associated with that. And also in general in Texas, the oil and gas industry consumes more natural gas than the residential industry, and so things like addressing oil refineries that may be outside the city is an important part of any good design.
In terms of how this has a global impact and its global applicability, Houston resembles a lot of cities in North America. So challenges with sprawl and dirty electricity mixes, and so therefore a lot of the solutions that we propose are very applicable in other North American contexts. Houston, as well as being the energy capital of the world, has the opportunity to show and to lead by example and to really showcase how big of a difference they can make by becoming more green. As well, because the American federal government is kind of stepping away from a lot of their climate agreements, it's really, the onus is on cities to take the lead. And I think that's especially true with what Houston's doing with its participation in C40 and the Climate Mayors Initiative that McKenna mentioned.